Hi again. As basic reading matter for Jehovah's Witnesses and ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, I can recommend this wonderful book by Dwight Wilson. He was not an ex-witness, but he wrote on a theme that will resonate with all of us who are ex-witnesses or even stuck in this cult. Armageddon Now. It was published in 1977 and got a lot of attention at the time because although Dwight Wilson is pre-millennial in his position, he seemed to be, in a way, discrediting the premillennialism that was very current in the 1970s. Nearly that is the pop type that you see in the TV evangelists who were new to television in those days. And the sensational book, The Late Great Planet Earth, Al Lindsay, which had popularized the dispensational position and sold something like 30 million copies. And that position has been, of course, advocated since by some who even outsold Lindsay. For instance, Tim LaHaye in his Left Behind series, popularizing certain aspects of the dispensational premillennial position. Now, Dwight Wilson is talking about the eccentricities or mistakes of some of those who have strongly advocated for specific applications of Bible prophecy. And he rightly starts by talking about the development of this modern position on premillennial prophecy and how far it goes back. And he does something that's very needful if we're going to examine JW roots. He goes to where the Gentile times idea and where the year-day concept came from, or at least where it developed most prominently, and that is in the period of the Puritans. So here he traces the development of some of the concepts that are behind modern premillennialism. According to Peter Toon, in his study of Puritan eschatology, the belief in the restoration of Israel was widely held even among the Puritans of the 17th century. Most Puritans subscribed to the idea of a large-scale conversion of Jews to Christianity before the end of time, and in turn believed that there would also be a return of the Jews to Palestine. Sir Henry Finch, in The World's Great Restoration, or The Calling of the Jews, that was in 1621, explained that the Euphrates River would dry up for the Jews to pass through on their return to Palestine, and that they would be opposed by Gog and Magog, who he equated with the Turks. But the Jews would win, as God fought for them. This interest in the restoration of the Jews was reinforced by the horrors of the 30 Years' War in Germany, which led men to imagine that they were living in the last days. Toon cited the great jurist Hugo Grotius for the observation that 80 books concerned with the millennium had been published in England by 1649. A writer of the second quarter of the 17th century, Joseph Mede, who was professor of Greek at Cambridge, is designated by Toon as the father of premillennialism, and John Milton and Isaac Newton are listed among his indebted successors. The radical Puritans, known as the Fifth Monarchy Men, believed that the millennium, or Fifth Monarchy, the successor to the four kingdoms of Daniel's prophecy, would soon be established. They interpreted the prophetic symbols as contemporary figures in British political life and pictured themselves as the instruments of God that would tear down the existing structure in order that God might establish this new kingdom of heaven. This is a curious contrast to the 20th century premillennialists, who tend to be pessimistic, fatalistic, non-political, and non-activist. Well, that was so in the 1970s anyway. John Tillinghast argued that the present works of God, the present work of God rather, work spelled charmingly with an E at the end, to bring down spelled with an E at the end as well, to bring down lofty men, to lay men low, and to throw down Antichrist. King Charles I was adversely identified by various writers as the little horn of Daniel 7 verse 8, as one of the 10 horns of the beast of Revelation in Revelation 17, and as the king of the north in Daniel chapter 11. As far as Israel was concerned, Tillinghast's interpretation led him to identify the 1290 days of Daniel 12 verse 11 as the years between 366, when the Jewish temple was supposedly destroyed, and 1656, when he expected the Jews to be converted and return to Palestine. Similarly, John Cann predicted that the Jews in 1655 would both defeat the Turks, who controlled Palestine, and return to their homeland, where they would be converted in 1700. Mary Carey forecast the conversion and return for 1656. Such speculation among English Puritans declined after the restoration of the monarchy. The American, Increase Mather, in a 1669 work entitled The Mystery of Israel's Salvation, Explained and Applied, affirmed the following beliefs, quote, that after the Jews are brought into their own land again, and there disturbed with Gog and Magog, not John's, but Ezekiel's Gog and Magog, at the Battle of Armageddon, who shall think with great fury to destroy the converted Israelites, the Jews who have been trampled upon by all nations shall shortly become the most glorious nation in the whole world, and all other nations shall have them in great esteem and honor, according to Isaiah 60, verses 1 and 3. That the time will surely come when the body of the 12 tribes of Israel shall be brought out of their present condition of bondage and misery into a glorious and wonderful state of salvation, not only spiritual but temporal. Eschatological interests, that's the end of the quote, by the way, eschatological interests continued to concern the American Puritans in the 18th century, but the focus was not premillennial. America's first major postmillennial thinker was Jonathan Edwards. His views parallel those of Daniel Whitby, who lived from 1638 to 1725, and Edwards was a contemporary of John Wesley in the middle of the 18th century. So Whitby is credited as the founder of modern postmillennialism. This scheme became the standard American interpretation from which the 20th century premillennialists would dissent. The restoration of Israel continued to be a prevailing theme even of the postmillennialist literature. Whitby's 1703 work, Paraphrase and Commentary on the New Testament, included a treatise of the millennium, showing that it is not a reign of persons raised from the dead, but of the church flourishing gloriously for 1,000 years after the conversion of the Jews and the flowing in of all nations to them, thus converted to the Christian faith. They had long titles in those days. So Wilson goes on to explain that Edwards speculated in his History of Redemption that within a century and a half the Mohammedans might be overthrown and the Jews converted. Contemporary science convinced him that the millennium was at hand. So Edwards is thinking about this around 1750. So he thinks that by around 1900 this process should have at least have started, and the Mohammedans would be overthrown and the Jews converted. Well, the Jews haven't been converted, but strange things happened that seem to vindicate these prophecies of the premillennialists, that something different was going to happen in the Middle East, and that the Turkish power would no longer hold the Middle East in thrall. And indeed, events of the 20th century seem to vindicate that position. So Wilson will go on to talk about that, and we'll make a video or two about that in the near future. So I strongly urge anyone who's interested in the history of prophecy and its interpretation to get a hold of Armageddon Now, where Wilson talks both about the eccentricities of some of the applications, especially in the last century, but also the conviction that has been there even before the Puritans, that Israel would have to be converted in order for the kingdom on earth to maintain, and for the flowing in, as Whitby puts it, the flowing in of all nations has to happen only after the conversion of the Jews. I'll put in a link to 7 predictions that Charles Taze Russell made about 1914, because Russell is one of the heirs of this tradition of interpreting the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation as day years, and his entire system is built around that assumption. Now, Wilson will have more to say about the way that assumption has been the ground of much of the speculation about the events of the 20th century being fulfillments of Daniel and Revelation. So we'll get to that in future videos, but 7 predictions of Charles Taze Russell about 1914 is linked on your screen.